Over the past 4 or 5 months, I've had 6 clients approach me for help on managing change. Some of it has been rapid growth. Some of it has been loss of talent in the legacy or the institutional knowledge because of the pandemic, people going on to do other things or retiring. And then a few of the clients are working on succession planning. How do I get my organization to the point where I can quit someday and go do something else? So what I'd like to do is share an aggregated list of the challenges these organizations are facing, some of the underlying causes or what you might call contributing factors, getting to root causes, and then some of the strategy that we're looking at. And in the process of putting this together, my hope is that it helps you get a framework for looking at your change situation and pick some of the areas that might be relevant for you. And then we can get into a discussion of finding out which of these areas are most important and how can I be of best help. So let's look at some of the challenges or the symptoms in this. So rapid growth is definitely one of the factors for some of the construction companies and some of the office furniture distributors I'm working with. And with that rapid growth, new people are coming in, bringing new attitudes and habits. Some of the companies have some turnover and loss of institutional knowledge. And how do we elevate the leadership of some of the first-line managers so that they can carry the weight? With some of the rapid growth has also been a trend towards lower margin business. And that flushes out the fact that some people's forecasting or pipelines are not very reliable. Because of all the opportunities, there's a tendency to chase after them rather than being strategic. And there's a real lack of basic selling skills, the inability to qualify properly, to position, and then to sell solutions and added value versus selling service or building relationships and relying on being the low price. What's common between all of them is that the same problems keep coming up, and so we're fixing the same problems. Things are falling through the crack. There are quality concerns. One of the principals shared with me that these are people who should know better. They've been trained. So if people should know better and they're not executing the way you know they can, then there are some underlying causes that we need to look at. With rework, incorrect orders, or project claims, that means that margins are eroding. There's a lot more people conflict and managers are getting pulled in. I've got several clients asking me for help to mediate between some of this conflict, and what we're actually doing is building tools and a process for people to work out their own conflict. With the companies I'm working with that have gone through rapid growth, the leaders are feeling less in touch with what's going on because there's more layers. And then there's the common complaint that managers aren't owning the results and managers feel like babysitters. So when we move to the underlying causes or the contributing factors, I've put these in question form. So one of the questions, does each employee really know how their job contributes directly or indirectly to the bottom line? Do they have a way of keeping score? Imagine you're in a game, you're on the field of play, and the only thing you know is that your coach is telling you thumbs up or thumbs down, but you have no clue what the rules are. You have no clue about how to keep score. That is the majority of workers in this world. That's how they feel. Gallup says since the pandemic, 80% of employees would rather be any place else than work, and 20% you're better off paying to stay home because of the toxic effect. The next one is about sales, and do the salespeople really know how to qualify and sell value? And is the compensation designed to incentivize selling solutions and improving profitability? Are the meetings boring? This is really important. We spend so much time in meetings, and meetings are where the big decisions are made if people are going along to get along, or if meetings are simply checking off the box, checking in. You're not uncovering the contributing factors and the root causes. With these conditions, are we depending on heroes to save the day? Is it a manager that has to step up or a project manager that's key? If the environment is dependent on heroes making everything work, that is not sustainable. Does employee conflict turn into drama, and do managers get pulled into that drama? Is there timely feedback for corrective action? In so many cases, when something doesn't go as planned or a problem surfaces, it doesn't get dealt with directly or immediately, and so the learning opportunity is gone. How good are we at having positive conflict? It's a key skill. It's the difference between a high-performing team and a mediocre team. It's the difference between a really cohesive, tight culture or one that doesn't have much conviction around its values and its processes. Are exceptions to the rule just baked into getting things done because the processes aren't clear or there's not a lot of cooperation between departments? Are people held accountable for outcomes, not activity, but outcomes? Are people too stretched to pay attention? Is the organization reacting more than planning? Do we feel like we're behind the 8 ball or behind the curve and always catching up? Do we have silos not working well together? Have we taken on business outside our sweet spot? Do we have the talent we need, and are they in the right seat of the bus? So these are the underlying causes, and addressing these are important, but they don't get to the root issues. The root issues, as we will discover, are more about culture and values and behavior and trust and those kinds of things. So let's take a look at some of the root issues that we've been exploring with our clients. So the first one is leadership communicating a clear vision, and is it reinforced weekly? People don't remember what we stand for, what's important, and that has to be continually reinforced because gravity, the path of least resistance, is continually pulling to take us off course and find shortcuts or do things the easy way. And with that reinforcement, are we regularly rewarding decisions and behaviors that reflect who we are at our best? Are we celebrating the wins? So next is about leadership, and what is the gap between what we say is important and our decisions and behavior? Are we committing the time to doing things right, or does it feel like we're always in a hurry? Do we openly and candidly talk about the big issues? Do we get the elephants in the room on the table? Is it safe to raise questions and concerns? Do people go along to get along, or are they willing to say what they really think and feel? Are we properly resourcing what we say is important? Have we identified the key behaviors that lead to success? These are leading indicators. If we're dealing with the symptoms in this first section, we're too late. We're already playing catch up, and it's 10 times more expensive to deal with something that has manifested as a problem because there are so many contributing factors that we haven't addressed. We're just putting out fires. So getting those leading indicators, those key behaviors that lead to success, and a way to measure them is essential. And what behaviors are we rewarding and punishing that might be competing with what we say is important to us? And how do our systems influence and contribute to the results that we don't want to have? The systems that we have to get things done, the processes that connect business development to sales, to order entry, to execution, to project delivery, to finalizing and accounting, oftentimes have systems that compete or don't work well together. So it puts everybody in a position of just trying to figure out how to make things work and jerry-rigging things. One business management consultant said that the system is perfectly designed to get the results that we're getting. So if your efforts to fix things are not resulting in permanent solutions, it's a good likelihood that there's systems driving these problems, and it's not correcting people or training. It goes deeper. Are some people more entitled and their behavior goes against what you say is important? They're setting the example. Have you identified and named your shadow and legacy culture? The shadow culture are all the workarounds, the things you don't see that people adopt to get things done. And the legacy culture is simply what used to work that people still hold on to that no longer will support you going forward. Now let's move into some of the strategies that we're deploying for my clients. So the very first thing is using a framework called the 7 things that get done. And this framework is pretty much foolproof, but we've got to implement all the pieces. So the first one is what gets pictured gets done. This is a vivid reinforcement of our values and our mission in picture and story form. Next is what gets modeled gets done. So it's one thing to say what you want and paint a great picture, but if you don't walk the talk, it doesn't work. And you will be surprised at all the little things that we do as leaders that undermine what we say is important to us. What gets scheduled gets done. You should not leave any meeting if a decision has been made to go forward with something without looking at the calendar and asking, when are we going to meet next on this? What gets resourced gets done. This is another common problem where you give somebody that already has a full-time job another role or responsibility because it's a good idea and it's not properly resourced, it's not properly trained. That's the next thing. What gets trained gets done. So the symptom of trying to implement good ideas that don't fit neatly in somebody's role or responsibility and just adding it on, it just doesn't work. What gets measured gets done, both leading indicators and lagging indicators, but it's about the 80-20 principle. Those few items that make the biggest difference, those need to be well-defined, clear to everybody, measured regularly, and given feedback and reports on progress. And then finally, what gets celebrated gets done. So many of the managers that I work with in the companies are get-it-done people, and it's not natural for them to think about celebrating wins or recognizing people for reflecting the values that we have. It's just not natural. It's not natural for me. So I do have to use checklists and calendars to help me remember to do this. The foundation of our work is building on strengths. That begins with individual strengths, team strengths, organizational strengths, creating a common language to use so that we can build cross-functional cohesion, break down silos, create deep trust, the vulnerability-based trust where people feel psychologically safe to be candid and to build what we call locker room accountability. That's peer-based accountability versus vertical accountability. The next thing we work on is to surface and identify and name the legacy and shadow cultures. So that goes back to some of the disconnects that we look at. And we've got an approach and a process to collect answers to these areas and bring it together and say, if there's incongruence between what we say and what we do, if we're rewarding the wrong things and not recognizing the right things, how does that show up? And one of the biggest issues is, what do we tolerate? And that could be as simple as sitting in a meeting, something goes wrong, your gut's telling you this shouldn't be, and just not saying something. I just had a session with a principal who shared that another principal was in the meeting. An issue came up. They didn't say a word about it, but afterwards they vented with the principal who shared this with me about why this was unacceptable, but they didn't say anything in the meeting. So as we move down now to redefining and redesigning the role of the manager is either your linchpin or your Achilles heel, and more so because of the pandemic, because they've been thrust into responsibilities they've never had before. They now have to be concerned about mental health and well-being like life coaches, and they have no background or training on that. So in addition to getting things done, part of the training has to deal with tying what they do and aligning it with the mission and values so they can align their team to what they do and how it connects to the mission and values and continue to use that as a plumb line. Managers, more than any time that I can remember in my career, also have to begin to develop leadership skills, and they also have to develop the ability to train and coach and build capacity on their team to shift the weight and the responsibility from their role of directing work, troubleshooting, and holding accountability to the team doing that. And then we need to go through and examine the systems and the processes and the misalignments and the mixed messages that our systems are sending, because the bigger we get and the more complex, the more our systems collide with one another, and then people figure out how to do workarounds, and then we begin to undermine what the systems are there to begin with. And then finally, with all of these issues, one of the great strategies is to do what we call divide and conquer. Create small cross-functional pods, it's like a Navy SEAL team, to tackle pinch points and those repeating problems, and putting those teams together using the strengths assessments that we use to put together these well-balanced teams. Just to share a quick story, one of the manufacturers I was working with had 18 months of backlog of issues that were on leadership's desk. So look at that: redefine and redesign the role of the manager. The leaders were the bottleneck. They were used to directing, troubleshooting, and holding accountability. But now what they did is they defined the problems based on the inventory of strengths traits. What strengths do we need that will best suit solving this problem? They went into their inventory and their bench of players, put together players that had the right combination of these strengths, gave them the reason for tackling this problem, what does success look like, and let them go. The CEO of that company said, we worked through 18 months of backlog issues in less than 3 months. So as we look at these different elements of the symptoms or the challenges, the contributing factors or the underlying causes, the root causes and the strategies, I hope this gives you a little bit of context for looking at your situation and picking the few areas you think will provide the best value for you. And then let's have a conversation.